世上有句话说，幸福的家庭都很相似，不幸的家庭各有不幸。在许多人看来，今年38岁的里外·布罗迪是有福之人。布罗迪认为自己的确很幸运，但人们通常所说的幸运还只是表层的，不解决根本问题。深层的，自己能终生把握的幸福之源，他也是后来才找到的。10年来，他走着一条修炼者之路，并作为一名人权活动家，活跃在公司、家庭和公益事业之间。好，让我们先来看看他的一些成长经历。
My name is Levi Browdy. I'm a director at a software company here in New York. I was born in New Mexico, which is part of the United States. It's in the southwest, beautiful part of the country, in July 1972. Both my mother and father are lawyers. My mother was a criminal prosecutor, very tough attorney, my mother. My father, very much more on the academic side in terms of the legal. He got his JD from Georgetown, and he was also a law professor. I have an older sister and 2 younger sisters, so I'm surrounded by girls on both sides. I love my job. I really got lucky, actually. Lawyers traditionally are the worst when it comes to computers. My father was an anomaly. He's the first one in his university to get an old DEC Rainbow, like before PCs were popular. He taught me, you know, we had a computer in the house when I was in high school, which was not very common back then. I was also got into a lot of the computers, got into development, programming. I spent many years working on Wall Street, developing software for some of the large brokerage houses there. And also developed a close-knit of people I worked with, a team of consultants. And we've been working together for like 15 years now. About 6 years ago, we formed our own company, a software company based here in New York. And now we get to build our own software, sell our own software, and it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy it.
每个孩子在盼望长大的过程中，都表现出对生活的一些特定向往和憧憬。看似普通的自然倾向，谁知不是体现着个人的天性，蕴含着人生轨迹的重要起点呢？父母的体察、理念和选择，自然而然地会影响孩子人生启蒙阶段的方方面面。如果父母的教育理念和学校的教育环境得当，会让孩子为自己怀揣的璞玉找到最合适的琢磨和成器之路。
I wanted to be a policeman, I wanted to be a guardsman, but then I remember the day I saw the first Indiana Jones movie, and that was it. I wanted to be in Indiana Jones. I mean, this is a very interesting guy, right? I mean, he's a PhD. He's very learned about the world, but he's not stuck in the library. He's out there. He knows about different customs in the world. He knows about different peoples, having tremendous adventures, and he's got that cool little whip thing that he has. So he was my hero for most of growing up. I was not a terribly good student in elementary school. I think the learning process, or what they were teaching in elementary school, I just found very boring. But when I got into high school, something just clicked. I really started to love learning. I went to a wonderful high school. It was very good for nurturing that. It was a private school, a college prep school. And I got very engaged. I became the student body president. I was captain of the basketball team, the soccer team. You know, all the other teams were okay. The soccer team was really good. We won state almost every year I was there. So that was a very serious thing. So I got very into the soccer team. And that was a big part of my fall every year, because that's the soccer season. At the same time, it was a great learning experience because, you know, I remember there was a time in my early senior year, I started to learn a lot about the civil rights movement. And so I would just pore over these books, and I actually developed a private study just for me with one of the history teachers, because I was so into the subject. I would spend, you know, weeks just bearing through the material, and it was great to have my parents, because they were involved in it too, so it was a wonderful resource. In high school, I developed an interest in things Eastern. My school was smaller, so it was a little bit more mixed. So I had my athlete friends where we did all of our sports, and I had sort of the academic friends. And then I had this group of friends who were most of them were kind of, I think, in the theater department. But they would do things like on a school night, they'd go out on a golf course and meet at 1 in the morning and just read Tao Te Ching. You know, because they were just very interested in this kind of stuff. So I would explore this stuff from a very young age. And whether it was just, meeting with these guys on a golf course, reading the Tao Te Ching, or going to a very formal environment where there's a formal sort of Zen Buddhist, out there teaching and, sort of a Japanese thing, some of the Chinese Tibetan stuff. So I looked around for a while before I was given a book about Falun Gong.
喜爱电脑的布罗迪，在东方文化的学习和研究中，满足着自己的精神需求。那他又是怎么开始修炼法轮功的呢？
I started to learn Falun Gong. Well, a friend of mine actually first learned Falun Gong. He's a very good friend of mine. And, we had known each other for a long time. So I know him very well. And, you could tell something was going on. He was we could tell some behavior changes in him. He was a little more calm. He was smiling sometimes when normally he wouldn't smile. So, again, he's a good friend. So it was easy to walk up and say, okay, all right, what's going on? What are you doing? And, he gave me the book, Zhuang Falun, from Falun Gong. So that's really what was my introduction to the practice. That, and then when he gave me the book, I remember it was sort of the last big snowfall of the spring. And I couldn't go outside, so I spent the weekend actually just reading through the main book of Zhuang Falun, and that's what really got me. That was early 1999.
听起来很简单，那么修炼是否会让生活更加繁忙和紧张呢？
No, just the opposite. I know. I mean, you'd think adding more things in my life would sort of make it more chaotic, more things I have to juggle. It's actually the opposite. I mean, I feel it's sort of, and it really boils down to, well, what is it you're adding to your life? Because there's a lot of things that you add to your life that, you're just going to have more things you got to juggle. It's going to become more chaotic. If there's certain things you add to your life, it actually becomes a lot more calm and steady. And by calm and steady, I don't just mean, I don't want things to happen to me and I just want to sit in my house and, everybody leave me alone. I'm talking about a spiritual calm where you can handle whatever's thrown at you. You are inspired to go out and tackle things that you wouldn't have otherwise. For me, that's real calm, is that it's a strength, it's a clarity of mind, and it actually emboldens and solidifies whatever it is you're doing. For me, it's about adding clarity and energy and strength to the things I want to do. Whether it's raising my kid or whether it's deciding, in my company, what's the next new big thing we got to build into the software. It's really about enriching that whole process, as I've found. Just in my assessment of Western society, there's a lot of wonderful things there, but it was also a little bit simplistic or a little bit too black and white. These sort of little categories that each, when you look at them by themselves, are rather limiting. If you look at religion, it just seemed a little bit too stoic, a little bit too almost academic. And it seems like spiritual growth is something much more visceral than that. It's something you actually do. It's something that you partake in. It's not just a story that you read about. I mean, by the time I was 19, I had already lived in Europe. I'd already lived in the Caribbean. I'd sort of gotten out and seen the world. And for me, looking at some of these practices, it seems like a natural extension of that curiosity to say, okay, well, let's see if we can really understand more about, as an example, karma. What is karma? How does it work? How does it affect people? Should we, every parent teaches their child to be nice and not mean to other kids. But why? I mean, obviously it's good to create a civil society, but is there something else going on there? Is there something in your own development and controls your own life that is at play when you talk about your virtue or your moral disposition or how you treat people?
对衣食无忧、家庭和学校条件优越的布罗迪来说，深层的精神满足不但更为重要，而且并非虚无缥缈、遥不可及。功夫不负有心人，古老的哲学、宗教和文化未能解答的问题，布罗迪在转法轮中找到了能撞击心灵深处的解答。
What I found was, it was enriching, but it wasn't. I didn't have the sense that clear answers were being given. It was nice theory, read about interesting principles, but it sort of stopped there, and it didn't go much further. Or in some cases, it was nice theory, but even the theory itself was a little bit confused or just wasn't quite sure. And it's interesting with Falun Gong because if you read the main book, Zhuang Falun, it's not like the language is mysterious or something you have to have a PhD to. It's very plain language. It states things very clearly, but it goes bing right to the heart of a matter. And it explains something in a way, and again, it's not just an intellectual process, oh, now I understand how karma works. But it's something you actually feel. It goes through you. Not do I only understand how it works, I understand how my life and what I do in my life is related to the laws of karma and how that actually affects me. It's a very profound process, which is interesting because, again, the language of the book is not terribly complicated or mystical, but it's a very profound process.
一边是体育健将和健身房常客，一边是有许多老年人习练的动作以缓慢圆为特征的法轮功功法，两者似乎摆不到一起。然而一入门，里外不但很快为法轮功的5套功法所倾心，而且找到了真我，找到了在任何环境中都能立于不败之地，都能提升自己的通天大道。
Well, there's a few aspects, I think, to talk about it. I think the first one that was most obvious when I first started was on the physical side. As I mentioned in high school, I was, the star athlete, and I continued to be an athlete in college, and even after college, very much into working out. I'd work out 7 days a week. Sometimes if I was really tight on time and I had to choose between lunch and working out, I'd work out. I mean, it was that kind of rigorous mentality just because I liked doing things physically. I liked running, I liked camping and hiking and stuff, but also I liked the feeling of being fit. I really, when you go to a gym regularly, it was a feeling of just being healthy and strong. It was different than if you just laid on the couch for a week. You can tell the difference. What first blew me away about Falun Gong was I look at the exercises and they're hardly doing anything. I mean, it's a sitting meditation, first of all, and then it's this very slow motion exercises, not even breaking a sweat. I'm thinking, okay, no matter where you look in traditional Chinese culture, you'll find some type of self-cultivation or meditation practice. So it was a very key component. I could see the more profound aspects of it, and I really wanted to try that, but I didn't think it was going to help a lot with physical things. And I was just blown away because after doing those slow motion exercises, that feeling I talked about when you're working out regularly and you're really strong and really fit was far greater with the Falun Gong exercises than it was, working out an hour or two in the gym every day. But really, that's not why I came into it. As I got more into Falun Gong, what I realized is it does something which I didn't realize I was looking for until I had found it. It let me be the person I'd always want to be. Which sounds sort of simple, but it's sort of, let me break that down a little bit. What I mean by that is that, you go through life and everybody has what we're all sort of human, right? So we all have human characteristics. Sometimes we get jealous, and sometimes we get upset when we don't want to. Sometimes, things bother us when we don't want them to, but we just can't help it. It's sort of, we resign ourselves to the fact that it's human nature. And we're stuck in that to some extent. And what I found with Falun Gong is it explained the principles of life and karma and how these things work so clearly, and also just invigorated my energy and my clarity of mind so much that I could break through those things. I was no longer held back by jealousy in a certain situation or, being angry with a certain situation, losing my cool, or not being compassionate in a certain situation where I just sort of discard people. It's like, ugh, get away from me. That was restraining me, and I could feel it. And what Falun Gong allowed me to do is actually break right through those barriers. And that was sort of a feeling I'd never experienced before. It's really profound. It sounds like a simple concept, but it's tremendously profound in terms of being able to grow as a person and what you can do, not only for yourself, but for other people.
可怜天下父母心，让我们来听听布罗迪是如何描述自己的2个孩子的。
My boys, which I'm glad they're boys. I grew up with all sisters, so I'm glad I have boys. No offense to those of you out there who have daughters, but my boys are 4 years old and 6 years old. So the oldest is in 1st grade, and the youngest is still in preschool, about to go into kindergarten. They're wonderful. The older one is sort of a very thoughtful child, He reads a lot, which is totally opposite of me. I was kind of a crazy young kid. And the youngest child is a total ham. I mean, he looks like he's going to be an actor, because every time he walks by a mirror, he stops and he starts posing and doing all these kinds of things. So they're very different boys, but they get along very well. So it's been a real blessing.
孩子是家庭的重要组成部分，父母和孩子的关系融洽健康，能让一家人其乐融融。父母对孩子的教育理念和教育方法，不仅影响到孩子的一生，也影响到父母甚至祖父母的家庭生活。
Well, it's interesting. My expectation of family and children has changed quite a bit. In my youth, it was sort of family, whatever. I just want to go out and explore life and have fun. I think as part of an influence of traditional Chinese culture, Falun Gong, these kinds of things, I've seen the wisdom and the real value and the real joy, actually, in some more traditional approaches to family. One thing I see, for example, with my own kids is that a healthy relationship with my parents, their grandparents, is really vital. It's vital for both parties, because for my parents, it's a chance to be around the young kids, and my parents love children. They're very good with children. And for the children, it's a chance to be around people who are older and wiser than myself, and get to learn from that, and they get a new dynamic from those people. So this is something that's been very important to me, to try and bring my parents and my children together as often as possible through the year. I've been leaning on my parents actually to move out to here, but they won't. He's got his own life in New Mexico. But they come out several times a year, and that's a really important thing to me, that family connection be maintained, because it really helps the children's development. It really helps the parents as well. Typically in the West is that children, it's a little too loose. Children, for whatever reason, are given carte blanche to sort of do whatever they want. And people are very concerned about, they don't want to harm them emotionally and everything. And they just they become the center of the universe. And I think this creates problems. When you're anybody, you're growing up thinking you're the center of the universe and you can do whatever you want. I don't think it's healthy it's not about control or anything. I don't think it's actually healthy for the children. So I was concerned about this when we first had our children. And then I'd go back to Taiwan, and I actually talked with my wife, who was raised in Taiwan, and I saw sort of at the other end of the spectrum that's also gone to a bit of an extreme, where there it's very regulated. You're basically not allowed to think a whole lot for yourself, and it's a punishment-based upbringing, really. And I felt that's not healthy either. So my take on raising the children is that it's important for them to have the encouragement that I had to go out and learn, to be excited about the learning process and explore different things. But it's also important to know that they're not the center of the universe. They're not even the center of the whole family. They're a part of it. And that's really important. And it's important in everything you do, whether it's you're going to dinner to set the table, well, they're going to help with that process. They're not just going to have everything brought to them. But at the same time, at the dinner table, we're going to listen to them just like we listen to everybody else. We're not just going to say you have to sit there silently while the adults talk. It's really important that they feel that they are part of something. And that's really what I've tried to do, raising the boys. Now, I've had to do it a little bit by myself because my wife, again, she had a tough time growing up in Taiwan. It's a very sort of rigorous thing, and she's very wary to do the discipline action. So I'm the disciplinarian in the family, which is, fine. I don't mind. But for me, that's always been a very important issue about how to make sure that they're brought up well-disciplined, but encouraged. And it's tough because we're here in the West, and a lot of the kids that they hang out with maybe aren't necessarily brought up that way. So I've had to kind of steer the ship properly so that they get that without being influenced too much by what's going outside, but also not being alienated. If they go over a friend's house, they go to a friend's house. If they do stuff over there they wouldn't do in this house, so be it. But that's always been a very important thing for me, is to make sure that they have that kind of upbringing. Well, I'm very involved in Falun Gong organizations now. At this point, I actually head up a nonprofit organization based here in New York. That's the press office for Falun Gong to the Western media. So at this point, I'm very involved. I deal a lot with all the stories that come out of China, getting those to media, getting those to human rights group, very, very much a part of my life. I mean, my life is when I come home from work at night, you know, we have dinner with the kids, I kiss them goodnight, I tuck them in, and I go downstairs and this is what I work on. We have no funding. We do our work very much, I mean, I'm a perfect example. On nights and weekends, out of our own pocket, whatever the situation needs, we do it. If the Chinese Communist Party has just done something terrible or issued some press release spreading some lie, I get on the phone with half a dozen people that I know around North America and Europe that are doing the same thing like me and say, you know, we really need to issue a press release on this, or we need to get this story to a congressman. And we just have a conversation about how are we going to get this done. And that's the way almost all of our work is done. It's all done grassroots, it's all done volunteer work, out of our own pockets.
从学习东方文化到修炼法轮功，对布罗迪来说，好比兴趣和精神需求的自然延伸。从中学时代就开始和老师、父母一起研究民权运动的布罗迪，成为法轮功信息中心创建人，如同水到渠成。与众不同的是那种对良心的诚实和对真理的信念。那么，面对一个西来幽灵党控制政府而发起的又一场全国性迫害运动，现实中除了精神层面的追求，远在美国的草根努力对中国的民众真的能起到正面作用吗？
Very much so. We've seen it makes a tremendous difference because first of all, the party does react to public exposure of what they're doing. We even see this in labor camps. I mean, an individual labor camp where someone had been torturing Falun Gong practitioners, and you expose that person. Let it be known what this person is doing to his community, to the people who are his friends and family, and watch what happens. A lot of times it will have an effect on that person, that they'll stop doing things so horrifically. But just to be clear, there's no hope for the Communist Party itself. The system itself is beyond repair. But what we can do is make it be not so vicious and ease up and let the world be more aware of what's going on and have them step up. That has a real effect. We've seen that happen. So I think that's one of the main things we'd be focused on.
99年7月开始受到中共全面迫害的10年来，法轮功给许多人的感觉是声势很大，搞很多公众活动。当明慧十方提出法轮功组织这个问题时，布罗迪说
is whether there's a membership roster, whether you sign up for anything like that. There isn't. There's just your desire to practice and the teachings. And whether you do that by yourself in a log cabin up on the woods or you do it like I do here in New York City, very much engaged with a group, is up to you. And that's also one of the things I love about the practice is it's very much about, you know, if you want to practice Falun Gong, you don't have to change your whole life. You don't have to move somewhere. You don't have to change your career. You don't have to get married or get divorced or anything like this. Whatever your life is, you fit Falun Gong into your life. You can take Falun Gong to anyone's life and they can actually practice it, whatever their schedule. The practice is very much about the individuals. Anyone who wants to practice, they get a book and they practice. And it's very much a grassroots thing. It's very much you learn from those who you love. I don't belong to a Falun Gong temple. I don't belong to a Falun Gong church. I do Falun Gong on my deck at home. That's where I practice, that's where I study. Now I think what's happened now, because of all the stuff that's gone on in China, with the persecution going on there, you've seen a grassroots movement of a different sort, where people coming together, people who practice Falun Gong, people who care about Falun Gong, forming sort of human rights organizations, forming these bodies to get something done, to try and get the human rights atrocities that are happening in China out and heard in media, in governments, and things like that. And in that sense, you know, those groups, there are several organizations that have developed out of that, but that's not to do with the practice. Those organizations strictly exist to try and do something about what's happening in China.
从热衷于有氧运动到沉浸于缓慢圆的法轮功5套功法，从运动健将到公司主管、人权组织负责人， 人到中年，作为丈夫和父亲的布罗迪，是否也开始遇到健康问题呢？心态又是如何保持的呢？
Like everyone, I'd have days when I'd have a bad headache, and I was like, ugh, or I'd have I'd just be weak and not have much energy, and just kind of lay it out on the couch and kind of wait for it to pass. Take a bunch of Tylenol, try and get it, this kind of thing. But after I started practicing, that stuff largely disappeared. Now I say largely because sometimes it still happens. Sometimes I have I'll get a headache or something like that. But I think now it's a very different experience for me on a couple of different ways. I mean, one, just on the basic level, is that in general, I think, society is a little bit too pain averse these days. I mean, sometimes people, I feel at least, people are a little bit too afraid of pain. There's nothing wrong with a little pain. They're too quick to grab a Tylenol or grab some chemicals and stick it in their body just to try and get rid of some pain. And I don't feel that's really necessary, because the body feels pain sometimes for a reason. It's telling you something, or maybe it's just a karma. There's karma that comes out in different ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a healthy process. And what I found is actually sometimes nowadays, and if I do get a really bad headache, it'll pass. You endure some pain. That's not going to kill you. It's not a big deal. And when it does pass, it feels a lot better. You feel a lot more cleansed. No, I mean, I think a lot of people have some of that interpretation, but to be honest with you, most of that stuff comes from the Communist Party. It's not like Falun Gong says that you can or cannot go to the hospital, you can or cannot get married, or can or cannot do this. There really are no rules. What it teaches are principles. What you decide to do with those principles is up to you. What it does, there's nothing about, you can't go to a hospital. What it does talk about is, what is karma? Where does it come from? What happens in the process of getting rid of karma? There's all this stuff about, you can't go to a hospital and stuff. I mean, this is one of about 20 or 30 things that when the Chinese Communist Party moved against Falun Gong and said, we're going to destroy this group, that's hard to do when you're talking about a group with, at that time, in China, was largely a household name and widely respected. I mean, these are people who are embracing principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. This is something they really take to heart. These are people really trying day in and day out in their life to be good people. It was a wonderfully sort of respected practice. How do you take something like that and destroy it if you're the ruling Communist Party? The first thing you have to do is make people believe Falun Gong is what it's not. Make them believe it's dangerous. Make them believe it has hatred, it has all these things. And that thing about not going to the hospital fits precisely in one. That's exactly one of the things they try and promote. Because if they can promote that, then maybe people will sort of forget about the wonderful things about Falun Gong and start listening to these propaganda points. And then it helps the Communist Party try and stamp out the practice. And it all comes back to that. After I graduated from high school, I applied to my colleges. I got into the college I wanted to get into, and then I realized I've been working. I mean, I loved it, but I've been working really hard. I wanted a little bit of a time to think. So I looked at overseas programs, and my father found a program that would actually send me to the Caribbean. It was very interesting, actually, because I got to go. It's a standard student exchange program after you leave high school. So you go for a year. You attend a high school there, and you basically learn the language and the culture. I went to the Dominican Republic, which was much more in development than it is now. Normally, they take overseas students and they place them in these very wealthy homes, so that you have 3 or 4 maids, and you've got an armed guard outside. It's very nice. The family that picked me was a complete anomaly. It was this skinny little civil engineer who lived way out in the woods. I mean, He was like 45 minutes outside of the capital city. We had this tiny little truck we'd bounce through the jungle with every day just to get to our house. And he'd sit in his back porch and he'd read like Indian philosophers. And his kids all thought he was strange. I loved him. This is great. So I spent a year after high school living in this little hut in the jungle outside of Santo Domingo. We rarely had electricity. We didn't have any running water. I would take baths in the local stream with the yaks and the cows and things like that. And I would just read. I read a tremendous amount while I was there. So it was a great year. So by the time I got done with that, and then I came back and attended my first year at university here on the East Coast. When I was in my sophomore year in high school, my father did a sabbatical in England. So picked the whole family up and moved us to just south of London. And I lived for a year there and traveled around Europe.
在上集中，布罗迪为明慧十方的观众谈了他的家庭观和教育观。当今世界变得格外纷繁多样，仍有很多人几乎没有选择，但也有很多人面临太多的选择。在这样的环境中，教育孩子的最根本点应该落在哪里呢？身为父亲的布罗迪是这样看的。
These days, I think in the West and the East, you see a lot of concern over test scores. But when it comes to the morality of the child and how they treat people, yes, there's a basic concern and they teach you not to hit other kids, but it's really not, their moral character is really not something that is dealt with a lot. It's all about their test scores. Don't hit other kids and make sure you get good test scores, good test scores, test scores, test scores. I think this is a real problem because your success in life, your happiness in life, all stems from the central issue of your character. Are you someone of moral quality? And I mean that at a very basic human level because it allows you to get along with people. I mean that at very profound levels in terms of you understand how karma works and you know how the universe works and how to work with that universe in harmony. So I think it's a very, very key issue for raising children. And coming back to your question about how I'd like them to, what kind of life I'd like them to live, I'd like them to be anchored in with their own moral compass to guide them. I think that's the most important thing, and that they understand the importance of virtue and they live by that. I think that's the kind of people I'd like them to become. In terms of the world, I hope that they live in a world that values that, that nurtures that in people, which is the exact opposite from what you're seeing in what the Communist Party is doing, which is trying to sort of nurture people to fight with each other and to condemn the other person and this kind of infighting, this sort of so-called social Darwinism.
道德作为一个人的根本固然重要，但现在社会上不仅年轻人倾向于认为竞争出强者，身为父母的也有很多人担心自己的孩子如果太善良，则很难在社会上立足。保持心灵的纯净和善性与在竞争中立足容身，这两者的关系如何把握为好呢？
There is that concept today that if you learn to compete and fight with each other, with all that fighting, you'll get stronger. With all that competing, you'll get smarter. But if you look at the real leap forwards, even in the scientific community, if you look at the real leap forwards that people have done, it's about when great minds come together and work with each other well. And that's where real advancement is made. You can, if you sit down to work with somebody, you're going to get a lot further when there's harmony between you than if you're constantly banging heads, because all the energy, even if it encourages you to work harder, all that energy banging each other's head, when you could be putting that energy to some forward progress. And I think you see examples of that in science, you see examples of that in politics. And again, we're just talking about the surface. We're just talking about, well, would the science advance further? Well, what about what happens to the karma of the people? What happens to, if you treat people horribly over and over again, do you think nothing's going to come back to you? Even if you did make more of a breakthrough in one little scientific area, what kind of life are you going to have? having done all those horrible things to all those people. In the long run, and very often in the short run, it's much, much worse when you teach people to be competitive and bang heads and mistreat each other to advance their own purpose.
过自己想过的生活，成为自己想成为的人。儿时我们都有这样的愿望，然而并非所有人都能保有那样的勇气和毅力，或者都能找到实现理想的精神指导。在即将步入不惑之年的时候，能平静地、自信地说此话的人是可喜可贺的。
Is that the biggest thing it's given me is to let me lead the life I've always wanted to live. Be the person I've always wanted to be. Well, I'll give you an example. I mean, I've always had, again, I had enough control to be perceived as very sort of nice and calm when I was young. But like when I get into basketball games, if I got a bad call from the ref, I mean, I would yell and scream and I'd throw stuff. And again, in that environment, it's sort of like, well, he's competitive, he's in the game, it's sort of okay. But it's not okay because that translates. That's part of who I am. So sometimes with the children, when the response, they do something and the response they need is someone to teach them the right thing, instead what they're getting from me is me just screaming at them. And that doesn't help. It hurts them, doesn't do me any good. They're not growing, right? Because I have this sort of fire in me, this sort of competitive thing that just wants to lash out sometimes. If I can get through that, and I've seen myself get through that, the kids will do something where normally I'd just yell at them and tell them to go away. I can actually, it gives me space to sort of, first of all, look at them and say, okay, why did they do that? What were they thinking about? Okay, Jesse, come here. Come here. Let's walk through this. It's a totally different experience, and it changes their life. It's not just about me, it changes their life and their experience of growing up. Falun Gong does that for me. It takes that fiery temper that I have and changes it into somebody who's nurturing. You know, and again, that's one aspect. That happens in every part of my life, and it keeps going, and it opens up horizons. So that's, for me, that's been the most amazing thing. You know, a lot of people, when they go into spiritual practice, the most amazing thing is, you know, they got cancer, was completely healed or something like that. For me, there was just parts of me that at a certain point in time that I'm always just going to yell at the kids. It's just who I am. No. I can actually get rid of that stuff. And again, when I do, there's a whole other level of engagement I have with my sons because of it.
那么，作为家庭的支柱，布罗迪是如何对待夫妻之间的文化、观念以及行为差异的呢？
Well, my wife, a few cultural context here. My wife is from Taiwan, and at least the way she describes it is that, you know, love there is expressed by yelling. It's the tough thing, so she'll yell at me a lot. The old way is just to sort of, oh, she's yelling at me, or just leave, or just yell back, put her in her place, right? How's she yelling at me? This is my country, I know what I'm talking about. Put her in her place, right? That's the old way. The new way is, wait a minute, not worried about whether she's yelling at me or not. Look at what she's thinking. Why is she yelling? There's something in her heart. Maybe I didn't do right, but there's something going on there. Take a step back and see why is she going through that, and actually being able to work through it. And again, when you do that, you take a situation where it was just sort of like, and then, you know, we go our separate ways, and you turn it into actually a growth experience, and actually our marriage gets stronger. It seems like a small thing, but it changes your whole life, because you put that instance, and that happens every day with somebody or someone. It's changing my whole life. I've found it's really important to deal with politicians on an individual basis, issue by issue, because there are some Democrats who do things that I would consider on the human rights side appalling, and I would not want to be associated with that. There are some Republicans, same thing. And so for me, what I've found in terms of political parties, it's really important to deal with an individual politician on an individual issue and not to just say, oh, whatever the Democrats say, I'm going to go with, or whatever the Republicans say, I'm going to go with, because sometimes they'll go a direction that really isn't something I believe in, and I'm not going to support that necessarily. Not particularly, again, more recently because I've been involved with human rights work. Human rights obviously brings in the issue of dealing with government officials. So I work with them on that capacity, I enjoy working with that capacity, but I'm not necessarily a political animal. I mean, there's some people that they're very political. They love, they just sit there watching C-SPAN all day long, and it's just, they love the game, the sport, the activity of politics itself. Not really something I'm into.
99年7月，当听到法轮功在中国遭受全面迫害的消息时，布罗迪学法轮功才几个月，但他义不容辞地登上了赶往美国首都华盛顿 DC 的火车。登上列车之后，才开始想自己去了能做什么，如何做。经过10年的深入研究，布罗迪是如何认识这场人权浩劫的呢？
The nature of the persecution in China is something I've had to come to understand a little bit over time. And I was at a little bit of a disadvantage because I didn't know much about the Communist Party either, so I had to learn about that. And I don't think you can understand the nature of the persecution without understanding the nature of the party itself to really get a sense of what's happening there. My sense of it now, having gone through the last 10 years and studied this kind of thing and seen what's happened, the nature of the persecution there is very much one of systematic. Every aspect of Chinese life is not free from this persecution. They squeeze you at every single place. I would say in that the party, it's not even the state or the government, the party itself has used, and this is what has really just been mind-blowing to me, has used every little aspect of society. They don't just use the police to take people away from their homes at night or the Public Security Bureau. They use schools, high schools, colleges, elementary schools, workplaces, neighborhoods. They even pit husband and wife against each other. They set it up so that everywhere you are, if you're a Falun Gong practitioner, you're going to be ostracized, abused, denied of rights, even young children. And this is really what brought it home for me. Young children going to elementary school, they're supposed to learn about the world. One of the things that the Communist Party teaches them is that Falun Gong is evil or all these other things, starting at little tiny kids. And it goes all the way through life. High school, entrance exams into college. If you don't say what the Chinese Communist Party wants you to say about Falun Gong, you can't get into college. You'll get fired from your job. And they'll take you to a brainwashing center, and they'll try to convince you that this practice that your personal experience has taught you is healthy, is enlightening, benefits yourself and those around you. They'll try to convince you that it's evil. For me, what I find so tragic about this is that this is not China. The Chinese nation that I studied about, that I learned about, it's a profound society, 5,000 years of culture that just has brought to the world some of the most dignified and rich religious traditions, cultural traditions, food, you name it. The China is the source of so much that is rich in the world. It's a tragedy that the party is able to confuse those two issues about what is China. The Communist Party is not China. The Communist Party comes from the West. It took over the country. It's a foreign import. And one of the things I worry most about now is that, especially the young Chinese kids, they can't tell the difference. They lose sight of that their real identity as Chinese is something they should be very proud of. It's a heritage that includes Confucius and Lao Tzu, Falun Gong, and all these great things. It's not what the party has raised them in. Yeah, this question comes up. Everybody looks at the economic growth of China and says that, well, there's a lot of bad stuff, but look, isn't this great what the government is doing? I think, to be honest, the economic growth is from the ingenuity and the work ethic of the people. The only thing the Communist Party has done is, on the economic front, is stop doing some of the suicidal stuff it's been doing economically. It's the people that have brought up the economy of China. In terms of how we learn this information, it comes from a couple of different angles. One is we have the Minghui website, which has literally, from what I can tell, the largest network of input from people on the ground inside China, from the largest cities to the tiniest little villages out throughout China. Every single day we're getting stories from people who are there, who are living this constantly. So that's one sort of steady stream of information. And then there's the personal contacts, where I have friends or people I know, this kind of stuff is happening to their relatives. And so you get the personal contact there. Those are really the two common streams. And then, of course, more recently, you know, I think the Western press and Western entities like Human Rights Group have a very difficult time getting in China. They just don't have the network. It's too many blockages to get in. But every once in a while, one will get in. One reporter will report on something, or one human rights group will discover something. And so that's a third angle that comes in that affirms the same thing I've been hearing from my personal friends, the same thing I've been reading on the Minghui website.
当一个人找到了满足精神深层需求的源泉，并用之浇灌着人生的每一天时，精神之旅是否就走到尽头了呢？
For sure that's it, because I found this wonderful thing called Falun Gong that allows me to, and ennobles my spirit, makes me feel really strong and positive. Now it's really a question about, what do I do with that? What am I going to do with that in my life? And that's what sort of presents me day in and day out. It's a challenge, it's a joy, but it's definitely a question. It's not a stopping, you know, sitting back on my laurels and say, oh, I found Gong, great, I found it. The process starts now. It's a matter of, you know, I have such this wonderful thing, what am I going to do with it? That's up to me. And it's up to me every day. So, yes, I found what I'm looking for, but the way I look at it is that means the journey's just started, not that it's ended.
人生难得，无论身处何地，身为何种职业，什么才是自己这一生这一世最最不能错过的珍宝？其实，在这个前所未有的特殊历史时期，人人都是幸运者，因为古人踏破铁鞋无觅处的，今人已无需寻找，真相已经来到每个人的身边，几乎人人触手可及。昔日郑国人买椟还珠，只是错过了一件珍品。今人如果轻看了这个历史阶段最重要的真相，错过的却可能是自己久远以来所等待、所期盼。生长于美国的黎外·布罗迪，只是世界各地千千万万法轮功学员中的一员。大家都是走过了各自的思考、追寻和实践的过程，才殊路同归，找到了让人从心底里踏实的人生答案。观众朋友，愿您也能早日找到永恒幸福之源，那样就能无论身处顺境还是逆境，富贵还是贫贱，都能活得平静乐观、自信向善。今天的明慧十方节目就到这里了，谢谢收看，我们下次节目再见。